Hey everybody, this is Lex Rofberg, and we're giving a little bit of a preamble before this episode as one of our High Holiday episodes. Initially, it was released in 2016/5777, right at the beginning of 5777 as we entered that new year. But we're re-releasing it this year because we think that these conversations about the Torah readings and Haftarah readings from the High Holidays are still relevant. And we didn't re-record new ones. As much as our ideas changed, they haven't changed so much that we have whole new takes on these texts. But we wanted to put them out there for you anyway, to, if you listened the first time, revisit, and if you didn't, to visit for the first time. So we hope you enjoy these, and send us whatever feedback you've got at dan@judaismunbound.com or lex@judaismunbound.com. Shana Tova, Happy New Year.
This is a special edition of Judaism Unbound, the High Holiday Readings. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dan Liebenson.
And I'm Lex Rofus.
And we're here with a special edition of Judaism Unbound today that actually is putting together a number of shorter pieces that you can find on our website, www.judaismunbound.com, in our special section on the High Holidays. We're going to be talking about each of the traditional readings for the High Holidays and looking at them with a Judaism Unbound perspective to try to find a way to see whether these traditional readings can still be relevant to us today as we potentially look at these holidays in a new way. So we're now getting into the next text, which is the Haftarah reading for the morning of Yom Kippur. It is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 57, verse 14, through chapter 58, verse 14. And the basic, this again is not a story. It's more of a kind of prophetic statement. The famous part of this statement or prophecy by Isaiah is Isaiah's quoting God as saying the following thing. This is starting in verse 5 from chapter 58. Is such the fast I desire, a day for men to starve their bodies? Is it bowing the head like a bulrush and lying in sackcloth and ashes? Do you call that a fast? A day when the Lord is favorable? No. This is the fast I desire, to unlock fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. It is to share your bread with the hungry, and to take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, to clothe him, and not to ignore your own kin. Then shall your light burst through like the dawn, and your healing spring up quickly. So it goes on from that, but really the basic idea of this Haftarah, to my mind, this is extremely sort of scandalous or subversive, right? The idea that on Yom Kippur, the day in which we're all focused on fasting and denying ourselves various comforts, that the reading that we read is where the prophet is saying, that's not what God wants. Right? Of course, people will say it's not that it's saying that you shouldn't fast. It's saying you shouldn't only fast, right? It's not that God doesn't want us to fast. It's that God doesn't want us to only fast and still oppress people and still not care for the needy, etc. But I think you could read it that God actually doesn't care about the fast, and that really what is meant by a fast here is the idea that you should fast from your kinds of bad behaviors from the rest of the year. And one of the things from a historical, critical standpoint that I think is interesting to know about this part of the book of Isaiah is that scholars have found or hypothesized that the book of Isaiah is actually made up of 3 different scrolls, 3 different books that were written at 3 different times. One was written before the destruction of Judah, one was written during the Babylonian exile, and one was written after the return from the Babylonian exile. And this chapter would be from the part called Trito-Isaiah, the 3rd Isaiah, that was written after the return from the Babylonian exile. And so what would be going on here historically is that the Second Temple had been relatively recently built, and everybody was so excited that we had gotten to go back to our way of being Jewish from before we were destroyed. And isn't it great that we are, we're back? And here Isaiah comes and says, this is wrong. This is problematic. There's something that we learned during the exile, something that we maybe learned during this time when we didn't have our old ways, that we're now forgetting because we're going back to our old ways. So sure, it's wonderful to be able to be in a position where we can really do these things unapologetically that we longed for so long, but let's not forget the other things that we were so focused on during the time when we didn't have a temple. And so, for me, I find that, again, one of these things where, if we think, for example, about the immigration to the United States and the idea that the Jewish community in the United States has become very successful over the last 100 years. And, more and more we have these wonderful synagogue buildings and these means and these and the laws are such that we can practice Judaism freely. And you can imagine that people just sort of focus and say, okay, let's just practice Judaism, and so it's sort of like strikes me as similar to what we discussed when we were talking about the Rosh Hashanah reading and the idea of what is a great nation. Does it mean great numerically, or does it mean great in terms of impact? And I feel like at times in which the Jewish community may have been less wealthy, less well off in terms of being free to practice Judaism in America, were times when we were more involved in the struggles of others in terms of civil rights and other labor rights and other kinds of movements. And now that the Jewish community is more stable and solid, a concern that I hear from many social justice activists that we have left some of that behind. And so for me, I think it's really interesting to reflect on that historical question of who Isaiah was in his time, and also to reflect upon the message itself, which is that, again, who knows exactly what Isaiah was trying to achieve. And obviously a more conservative reader will say, no, he was just meaning something supplementary to what was going on in the temple. But I want to take it to the radical place and say what Isaiah is recommending here is a different Judaism.
Yeah, I'm thinking to a story that you, Dan, and I actually shared with one of our listeners. We were visiting a listener and friend of the show in Florida, and he was telling a story. He's very involved with a few different kinds of advocacy, and he was relating a conversation he had with a friend of his who called herself a bad Jew. She said, "Ugh, I'm not a very good Jew." Pretty typical story. I think she, hadn't gone to services in many, many years, and all of these things that historically people might think of as, oh, those are markers of, decisions that go against the Jewish grain. And this listener, our friend, he responded to her, "I'm talking to you because we're meeting about pancreatic cancer research. You work professionally for this incredible organization trying to heal sick people. Like, you're the most Jewish person I know." And I heard that story, and I just nodded my head vigorously because of course, and people think that that's this dumbing down or this watering down of Judaism to imply, no, Judaism really is in the end just about doing good work on this planet while we're here. I don't think it's dumbing it down. I think if God willing, we could all be as dumbed down as individuals such that we spend hundreds of hours of our lives every year doing work to make the world better in whatever corners we can. And I think that's what this text is saying. I think that's what Isaiah is saying. It's saying, no, those rituals are, whether or not it's saying you do or you don't need to do those anymore. Forgetting that for a second, it's saying the key work is helping the poor, feeding those who are hungry. That the list that it keeps going with. And as you spoke about social justice activists, I think of myself as one, and I'm in some circles with many others, and I often hear in comment threads or otherwise, well, you should just be honest with yourself, because it's fine that you do what you do, but your religion isn't Judaism, your religion is the left, or your religion is progressivism, or your religion is social justice. And okay, first off, if somebody were to say, yes, my religion is no longer Judaism, instead my religion is going to be social justice, and I'm going to spend my life doing social justice, that would not be a tragedy to me. That would be good for the world. I would like them. I think Judaism can help with that. I think this text is evidence of that. But God willing, people make social justice part of whether it's their religion or their daily lives. I think that's what this text teaches us.
Yeah, and it gets to this question, I think, which is really a modern question, which is, of what good is Judaism? Why be Jewish? And, I think some people can, and I have respect for people who say the reason why they're Jewish is because they believe that God commanded it and they want to follow God's commands. Fine. But I think for the vast majority of people, of Jews today, that is not what they believe. And the question is, if they don't believe that, does Judaism still have something for them? And what I think is that if it does, it would be something like, if you take seriously Judaism, whether it's ideas or its practices or new ideas or practices that would emerge out of its crucible, out of its material, the remix that we've talked about, that somehow those would help you live the kind of life that you want to live, and that you hopefully want to live a kind of life in which you make a contribution to the world. And that the only value of Judaism is because it somehow enables you to live that life. And in a way, the way I read this text today, as I'm sort of thinking about it, is that it's raising the question. It's saying, if this doesn't help you do that, then stop doing it. if fasting helps you stop oppressing the poor and help those in need, great. But if fasting isn't doing that, then it's not that you should stop being Jewish, I think. I think it's that Judaism needs some major surgery. And I think that's an open question today, whether that's the case or not. And if it is, then the question is, what would that look like?
Yeah, that what would it look like question is a really big one. And on the note of that question, we're going to close out this episode that looked at the Haftarah reading for the morning of Yom Kippur. We want to encourage you to check out our other readings. You can find those on JudaismUnbound.com in our Listen and Learn track of the High Holidays Unbound initiative, or on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you typically listen to our podcast. And with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.